touches so much on some of the items that you mentioned here, where it became a possession, an integrative experience, wherein you mentioned, parts of your lives you'd be thinking about it, and something else would come in. And I suppose why the importance of having that vision and seeing things from an integrative perspective can be valuable, even if it was quite a difficult project.
Yeah, no, I'd love to speak about it. I mean, so it was this project where it had come on the tailcoat of me working in the film industry for about 10 years. And in those last few years, I got this sense that the directors of that time period, anyway, they didn't want to really hear melodies anymore. They did, which is something that I'm very passionate about and that interests me about music. They didn't want to hear, traditional, like, orchestral setups with the sound and everything. It was going very, very ambient at the time. And this was very much the influence of composers like Hans Zimmer and stuff like this, where, instead of the theme being like the 30 notes of like a John Williams theme, it now became like just 2 chords. Dun, dun. And that's it. And it's like, that wasn't interesting to me. That wasn't engaging. So I ended up, as one of the reasons for falling out of film scoring was that. But as that was happening, I got this like impetus in me to be like, hey, you used to write songs when you were younger. That was like your first introduction into music. And so from that, there was this inclination to now pursue something that was slightly foreign to me, which was like hip hop, where there's rappers involved, kind of like in the band The Gorillaz, and also writing songs in the traditional sense with melodies and getting in contact with singers and working with them, because I have a horrible voice for singing anyway. And I could do everything else. I could do the music, I could do the lyrics and stuff like that. And in the process of that, I maybe, I'm possessed by something like one of these spirits. And so I think even bigger. I say, well, I also can do art. So why don't I do an original piece of art for each one of these songs as kind of a functional cover art? And also each song should have a music video. And this was incredibly, challenging, and one of the most fulfilling experiences with creative work that I've ever had. Partially because I ended up working with so many people in the process, working with singers, working with rappers, working with, a saxophone player, working with people who are filmmakers to create these music videos. And so, I would wake up thinking about it. I would, in the middle of my, job, as I had like a little break between students, because I teach music, like 15-minute break, and I'm kind of at the piano, and it's a seed for the next song I'd be working on for the next year. And then I would go to sleep thinking about it. And it was, in that regard, it was really, really wonderful. It gave me a really clear framework. You have your life, your daily obligations, and then there's this big mythopoetic tapestry that you're working on, that is so engaging that anytime you want, you can just kind of like check in on it and do a little bit over here in a corner, work for 5 minutes over here. So that's what it looked like and felt like for a period of about 4 years, I think.
Now, that's such a beautiful image you mentioned here too, because I have such a burning question about this. Is I'm assuming there was difficult parts of this project. There were maybe parts you thought about quitting, or was there not? Was it because did you give yourself a deadline and then there was a pressure, or was it more like what would it be? I don't know if it was Michelangelo or who it was, where you would, as you mentioned, you do these little parts here and there, and there's no sort of constraints grounding the project.
Yeah, the only constraints I would say were monetary. By the end of it, I was a few $1,000s in the hole. And this was just money spent, I wanted to do this official. I wanted the musicians to feel appreciated. So I paid everybody. If I was working with a rapper, I told them, this is, how much I can pay you. And they said, great. And let's go in the studio, and pay a studio fee, not do it out of a bedroom.